Congresswoman, facts do not bend to feelings. But on that night, they were about to collide with them in full view of a national audience, and that single sentence spread faster than anyone in the room anticipated. Within hours, clips flooded every platform, reaction videos stacked on top of reaction videos, and the line itself became shorthand for a moment that felt larger than the debate. 72 hours later, the view count had crossed into territory usually reserved for celebrity scandals, not policy discussions. For Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it was the first unmistakable sign that accepting this debate with Ben Shapiro might have been a profound error in judgment. But the collapse did not begin with that sentence, and it did not begin with the applause or the memes. To understand how the evening unraveled, you have to go back 42 minutes to a moment when the outcome still seemed uncertain and the balance of power had not yet shifted. The CNN studio was filled beyond capacity. Prime-time lights humming, cameras gliding quietly across the floor as the audience settled in. There was a nervous energy in the room, the kind that only exists when people sense they are about to witness something unscripted. This was not a routine panel discussion or a friendly exchange of talking points. This was the debate many viewers believed should have happened years earlier. Ever since 2018, the possibility of a face-to-face confrontation between Ben Shapiro and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had hovered in the background of American political culture. That year, Shapiro had issued what he described as a straightforward invitation to debate policy, even attaching a charitable donation as a gesture of good faith. Ocasio-Cortez publicly dismissed the invitation, likening it to unwanted advances and framing it as an example of entitlement. The comment went viral, solidifying her refusal as both a political and cultural statement. From that point forward, the idea of a debate became a recurring punchline rather than a real prospect. For 7 years, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez built a media presence that thrived in environments where she controlled the tone and the framing. Late-night shows, sympathetic interviews, and social media platforms allowed her to speak without interruption, often to audiences already aligned with her views. Ben Shapiro, by contrast, continued to call for a direct exchange, framing it as a necessary test of ideas rather than personalities. The gap between their approaches became part of the mythology surrounding both figures. Supporters on each side claimed victory without the contest ever taking place. That history is what made the night feel so charged. When CNN announced the debate, it was marketed as a long-overdue confrontation, a moment when two sharply opposed political figures would finally share a stage. The framing alone drew millions of viewers before a single word was spoken. For Ocasio-Cortez, it was a chance to demonstrate confidence and prove that her critics exaggerated her reluctance. For Shapiro, it was an opportunity he had been openly preparing for since the first invitation was rejected. Ben Shapiro took his seat on the right side of the stage, a position that felt symbolically appropriate even to those who pretended not to notice. In front of him sat a glass of water and a neatly arranged stack of papers, thick enough to draw comments online before the debate even began. At first glance, he appeared relaxed, almost indifferent, leaning slightly back in his chair. But small details betrayed the calm, the subtle tapping of his fingers against the table, the way his eyes tracked the room. He looked like someone waiting for a long-delayed appointment rather than a confrontation. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez entered moments later from stage left, followed by members of her team who stopped just short of the camera frame. She smiled broadly, waved to the audience, and acknowledged applause with the ease of someone accustomed to public adoration. Her body language projected confidence, shoulders back, chin level, posture open. To many viewers, it looked like the beginning of a victory lap rather than a risky engagement. There was little indication, at least on the surface, that she expected the night to turn hostile. Jake Tapper stepped forward to moderate, his voice measured as he outlined the rules of engagement. Each participant would have 2 minutes per response. Interruptions were limited, and the expectation was civil discourse. The rules sounded reassuring, even comforting, to an audience used to televised chaos. Tapper's tone suggested neutrality, an attempt to present the debate as a fair contest rather than a spectacle. Both participants nodded in agreement, though for very different reasons. As the microphones were adjusted, Ben Shapiro leaned forward and made a brief remark about time limits. 2 minutes, he said, was generous, since he usually only needed a fraction of that to make his point. The comment drew a ripple of uneasy laughter from the crowd. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's smile held, but it lost some of its ease. Something in the room shifted, subtle but perceptible. The opening question was intentionally broad, something about bipartisanship and cooperation in a divided Congress. It was the kind of question designed to warm up the speakers, to let them settle into familiar rhetoric. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez prepared to answer in the language she had perfected over years of interviews. Ben Shapiro, however, did not respond to the question at all. Instead, he redirected the conversation before it could begin. Before policy, he said, there was an issue that needed to be addressed directly. He thanked Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for accepting his invitation, emphasizing the word finally. 7 years, he added, with a small shrug that drew scattered laughter from the audience. Some relationships, he joked, simply take time. Ocasio-Cortez did not laugh, and her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Shapiro then took the audience back to 2018, recounting the original invitation in precise detail. He described it as polite, straightforward, and focused on policy differences rather than personal attacks. He reminded viewers of the offer to donate to charity or her campaign, framing it as a sign of good faith. Then he read her response aloud, word for word, without commentary at first. The studio grew noticeably quieter as the comparison to catcalling echoed through the room. He placed his phone down carefully, as if setting aside an exhibit rather than a prop. Then he asked a question that sounded deceptively simple. What had changed? Had his intentions improved, or had her political circumstances shifted? The phrasing was calm, but the implication was sharp. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned forward, her voice steady as she explained that engaging with bad faith actors often only amplifies them. She argued that ignoring such figures had been a strategic choice, not an act of fear. Shapiro raised an eyebrow and pointed out that he had quoted her directly. Was quoting her words now considered misrepresentation, he asked. The exchange marked the first visible crack in her composure. She accused him of taking her words out of context, a familiar defense. Shapiro responded quickly, pressing on the context itself. The comparison, he noted, was between a debate invitation and sexual harassment. His speaking pace accelerated, sentences stacking tightly together. The rhythm of his delivery began to change the energy in the room. He outlined 3 possibilities, counting them off with deliberate precision. Either the comparison had been dishonest then, dishonest now, or she was unwilling to defend her positions publicly. He paused after listing the options, letting the silence stretch. Which one was it? He asked. The question hung in the air longer than the moderators might have liked. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez started to object, saying she would not dignify the framing. Shapiro leaned back slightly, cutting her off with a small smile. She did not need to, he said, because her presence on the stage already had. Either the comparison was nonsense, or she had chosen to show up anyway. The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and uncomfortable laughter. Without waiting for her response, Shapiro pivoted to a broader critique. For 7 years, he said, she had operated within environments designed to protect her from direct challenge. Social media, friendly interviews, and curated appearances had allowed her to speak without sustained scrutiny. Tonight, he added, there was nowhere left to hide. Then he tapped the stack of documents in front of him. He began with a figure that immediately altered the mood of the room. $3 million, he said, paid to her boyfriend's consulting firm. The murmurs were instant, spreading through the audience like a wave. Jake Tapper called for order, but the damage was already done. The debate had moved from abstract principles to concrete numbers. Shapiro framed the topic carefully, returning to a theme Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez herself often emphasized. Money in politics, he said, was something she spoke about with passion and conviction. He quoted her calls to remove corporate influence and end dark money. Then he repeated the figure, nearly $3 million during the 2020 cycle alone. The contrast was unmistakable. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attempted to interject, insisting the payments were for legitimate services. Shapiro agreed with exaggerated politeness, his tone thick with sarcasm. So legitimate, he said, that multiple complaints were filed with the FEC. So legitimate that the relationship ended quietly when scrutiny increased. So legitimate that internal records showed minimal infrastructure supporting the payments. He held up documents detailing staffing levels, emphasizing the number of employees. 4, he repeated, letting the audience do the math. Nearly $3 million divided among 4 people. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pointed out that the firm had other clients. Shapiro noted how conveniently those clients existed within her political orbit. He walked through the timeline, highlighting overlapping personal and professional relationships. He joked about his own background, suggesting that even by conservative standards, the sequence raised questions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez insisted her personal life was irrelevant. Shapiro countered that it became relevant when donor money was involved. The exchange marked a turning point, as the debate shifted fully into confrontation. She argued that her campaign expenditures were transparent and lawful. He responded that legality was not the same as integrity. If she wanted money out of politics, he suggested, she could start at home. He introduced testimony from a former employee describing a lack of deliverables. Her legal team reacted immediately, scribbling notes behind her. Shapiro's voice softened briefly as he spoke about hypocrisy. Her brand, he said, was built on fighting corruption, and this undercut that image. The filings were public, accessible to anyone willing to look. Facts, he reminded the audience, did not care about branding. Then he hinted at what was coming next. Ben Shapiro reached into his folder and pulled out a glossy photograph, holding it up just long enough for the cameras to lock in. It was instantly recognizable, the white dress with bold red letters that had circled the internet months earlier. Tax the rich, spelled out dramatically across fabric worn on one of the most exclusive carpets in the world. Shapiro tilted his head slightly, as if examining the image for the first time. "Beautiful dress," he said, measured and deliberate, before explaining where it had been worn. He reminded the audience that the Met Gala was not a protest rally or a town hall, but a charity event with tickets priced at $35,000. $35,000 just to walk the carpet and eat dinner, he repeated, pausing long enough for the number to sink in. He admitted fashion was not his area of expertise, joking that his wife chose most of his clothes. Still, he said, there was something mathematically fascinating about the symbolism on display. Wearing a slogan about taxing the rich at a party funded by the rich struck him as irony doing heavy labor. A few laughs broke through the tension, even from parts of the audience clearly sympathetic to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She crossed her arms and waited, letting him finish. When she spoke, she defended the gesture as intentional, arguing that the message was delivered directly to those who needed to hear it. The medium, she said, was the message. Shapiro nodded, acknowledging the phrase, then countered with his own interpretation. The message he received, he said calmly, was hypocrisy. He lowered the photograph and replaced it with another document. This one, he explained, came from the House Ethics Committee. Not Republicans, not conservative media, but a bipartisan body. The finding, he said, was straightforward. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had violated gift rules. She had failed to properly pay for accessories associated with the event. She had also failed to pay for her boyfriend's meal. Yes, he added, the same boyfriend whose company had received millions in campaign funds. The audience reacted audibly, the murmurs louder than before. Shapiro walked through the timeline carefully. The payments for the dress rental were not made at the time of the event. They were not made shortly after. They were made months later, only after ethics investigators intervened. That distinction, he said, mattered. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attempted to explain that she had taken steps to comply. Shapiro cut in, correcting her phrasing. That was not proactive compliance, he said. That was reactive damage control. One vendor, he added, had even threatened legal action before being paid. He ticked off each point with increasing speed, building momentum. The dress itself had been custom-made, he continued. The original rental value had been set at $1,300. Her campaign staff negotiated it down to $300. $300 for a custom dress created specifically for her. The Ethics Committee, he noted, called that valuation unrealistic. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tried again to respond. Shapiro stepped away from the podium slightly, shifting the focus outward. "Let's zoom out," he said, broadening the lens. "You claim to fight for the working class. You claim to be one of them." He began listing details, not as accusations, but as contrasts. A luxury apartment in the Navy Yard area of Washington, D.C., reported rent well beyond what most working families could afford. A Tesla, produced by a company whose CEO she frequently criticized. Regular visits to high-end salons with prices far removed from everyday reality. None of this, he emphasized, was illegal. She was free to spend her money however she chose. The issue was not wealth itself, but the contradiction in rhetoric. You cannot preach socialism while living like a capitalist, he said. You cannot tax the rich while socializing with billionaires. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez raised her voice slightly, insisting she had never claimed to live in poverty. Shapiro acknowledged that point immediately. "But you do claim to be a democratic socialist, fighting for the working class," he replied. "The working class cannot afford Met Galas. They cannot afford luxury high-rises and $50,000 electric vehicles." He returned to his seat and let the silence work. "What they can afford," he added, "is clarity. They can see through politicians who wear ideology like a costume. They can recognize when it comes off as soon as the cameras stop rolling." The phrase champagne socialism landed with a mix of laughter and discomfort. Jake Tapper finally managed to redirect the discussion toward the economy. He asked a question about growth, inflation, and long-term sustainability. Ben Shapiro smiled, visibly energized. Economics, he said, was a topic he was happy to discuss, especially with someone who held a degree in the field. He acknowledged Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's academic background. Boston University, cum laude, very impressive, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Then he revisited one of her most widely circulated statements. In 2019, while promoting the Green New Deal, she had warned that the world would end in 12 years if climate change was not addressed. He glanced theatrically at his watch. By his count, he said, several years had already passed. That left roughly 7. How was the timeline looking? He asked. Should people begin saying their goodbyes? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sighed and called the statement rhetorical. Rhetorical, he repeated, but also apocalyptic. Such language, he argued, had been used to justify a sweeping policy proposal. Cost estimates for the Green New Deal ranged from $51 to $93 trillion. He let the number hang in the air, repeating it slowly. Trillion with a T. For context, he added, the entire U.S. GDP hovered around $28 trillion. Her proposal would cost several times the nation's entire annual output. So his question was simple. How do you pay for it? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez launched into an explanation involving public investment and job creation. Shapiro interrupted. Those were buzzwords, he said, not an answer. He asked again, specifically, how $93 trillion would be funded. Modern monetary theory, she suggested, could play a role. Shapiro clapped his hands together once, theatrically. Ah yes, MMT, he said. The idea that money could simply be printed without consequence. Congresswoman, he continued, you have an economics degree. You know that printing money leads to inflation. We just lived through it. He cited recent figures, inflation hitting levels not seen in decades, grocery bills climbing by double digits, gas prices spiking, rent increasing faster than wages. And your solution, he said, was to print more money. Without waiting for her response, he moved to another example. In a previous interview, she had explained low unemployment by claiming that people held multiple jobs. He paused deliberately. That is not how unemployment statistics work. The unemployment rate measures how many people seeking work cannot find it. Whether someone holds 1 job or 5 is irrelevant, he explained. They are either employed or they are not. Having 2 jobs does not lower unemployment. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tried to clarify that she meant underemployment. Shapiro talked over her, pointing out that precision mattered in policy. He then referenced her comment about the 3 chambers of government. There are 3 branches, he corrected, not chambers. The chambers are the House and the Senate. You work in one of them, he added. The audience laughed, louder this time, even from liberal sections. Then he arrived at what he called his personal favorite example. When Amazon announced plans to bring its second headquarters to New York. 25,000 jobs, average salaries exceeding $150,000, all within her district. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez celebrated when the deal collapsed. She argued that the jobs came with $3 billion in corporate subsidies. Shapiro nodded, acknowledging the figure. Then he explained the projected tax revenue. $27 billion. That, he said, was a 9-to-1 return on investment. He spoke slowly, as if explaining arithmetic to a reluctant student. Amazon would receive incentives. In return, thousands of high-paying jobs would generate income tax, sales tax, and property tax. People would buy homes, eat at restaurants, and spend money locally. That was not corporate welfare, he concluded. That was investment. They teach this in economics classes, he said. Perhaps not at galas, but certainly at universities. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez began to respond, but Shapiro pressed forward. Here's the thing about economics, Congresswoman, he said. It is not about feelings. It is not about what sounds good on social media. It is about math. And the math does not add up. The math behind the Green New Deal did not add up. The math behind her explanations did not add up. The math behind her understanding of basic concepts did not add up. He shrugged slightly. An economics degree, he said, did not exempt someone from scrutiny. He looked directly into the camera. Facts do not care about your degree. An economics degree that does not understand unemployment statistics is not doing its job. The next round, he promised, would expose something else entirely. Performance. Ben Shapiro reached down and lifted a tablet from beside his chair, turning the screen toward the audience as if preparing to present evidence in court. He told Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that he would give her credit for one thing before continuing. She was exceptionally talented, he said, at commanding attention, possibly the most effective performer in Congress. The word performer lingered in the air longer than anything else he had said so far. He tapped the screen, and the studio monitors flickered to life. Footage began playing from a widely circulated protest related to abortion rights. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez appeared walking slowly, hands clasped behind her back, flanked by police officers. Her expression was solemn, resolute, almost cinematic. At one point, she raised her fist as cameras clicked rapidly around her. "Very dramatic," Shapiro narrated dryly. "It looked like a moment pulled straight from a history documentary." There was only one problem, he said. She had not been handcuffed. She had not been arrested. He paused the video on the exact frame where her fist was raised. She had received a citation, he explained, the equivalent of a parking ticket. No jail, no charges, no arrest record. But the imagery suggested otherwise, and the clip spread accordingly. Millions of viewers believed they were watching a lawmaker being taken away for her beliefs. When critics later pointed out the absence of handcuffs, he continued, "She did not correct the record. She did not clarify. She did not say the clip was misleading. She allowed the narrative to stand." That, Shapiro said, was not activism. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's face hardened as he spoke. She said she had been demonstrating solidarity. Shapiro responded immediately, cutting through the phrasing. "You were performing for the cameras," he said, "and you knew exactly how it would look." He swiped to the next clip without waiting. The screen changed, and the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. January 6th. The audience tensed before he said another word. This was the part many viewers had anticipated with unease. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had previously described that day as a near-death experience. She had spoken emotionally about fearing for her life. Shapiro acknowledged that fear was subjective and personal. Then he pulled up a detailed map of the Capitol complex. He pointed to specific buildings as he spoke. "You were not in the Capitol building," he said calmly. "You were in the Cannon House office building, across the street. The man who frightened you," he continued, "was a Capitol police officer, an officer evacuating you for your safety." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's voice wavered slightly as she responded. She said she did not know who was at the door at the time. Shapiro did not dispute that. "But you knew where you were," he replied, "and you allowed people to believe you were hiding inside the Capitol itself." He set the tablet down gently. "There was a pattern here," he said, "a pattern of exaggeration, of framing events for maximum emotional impact. The protest walk, the January 6th account." Then he added another example. The border photo that had circulated widely. Tears, anguish, a powerful image of compassion, later revealed to be taken near an empty parking area rather than an active detention site. Again, he said, the image mattered more than the context. He began counting on his fingers as he spoke. The Met Gala moment. The tax, the rich dress. The working-class messaging paired with luxury living. Every element, he argued, was carefully curated. Everything about you is a production, Shapiro said, lowering his voice. Designed to go viral, designed to be shared, designed to make people feel like you are fighting for them. But feeling is not governing. The room was silent now in a way that felt different from before. This was not playful tension. This was discomfort. Shapiro leaned forward, introducing what he called an uncomfortable truth. He pulled out one final document. In 6 years in Congress, he said, you have sponsored or co-sponsored hundreds of bills. That sounds impressive on paper. But do you know how many have actually passed? How many have become law? He looked down at the page, then back at her. 0, not one. The most recognizable member of Congress, he said, and the least legislatively effective. The contrast landed hard. 20 million social media followers, he continued, magazine covers, viral clips, global recognition, and 0 legislative victories. He placed the document down slowly. You are not a legislator, he said. You are an influencer. There is nothing wrong with being an influencer. But you are supposed to be a congresswoman. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez finally raised her voice in protest. She said she had fought for legislation that mattered. Shapiro corrected her immediately. There is a difference between tweeting about change and making change. You excel at one and fail at the other. He turned briefly toward the audience. She has the Instagram. She has the Twitter. She has the viral moments. What she does not have is a single law with her name on it. Then he turned back to her. All performance, no policy. The phrase felt rehearsed, but devastating. The Instagram congresswoman, he said. 0 bills passed. Millions of followers. That is the formula. And it has worked. Until now. Jake Tapper announced that they were moving to closing statements. 2 minutes each. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went first. She spoke about inequality, climate change, and working families. Her delivery was polished and emotionally resonant. It was exactly what her supporters expected. Passionate, earnest, vision-driven. The applause was strong, though not as loud as earlier in the night. Then it was Ben Shapiro's turn. He did not stand. He did not raise his voice. If anything, he slowed down. The tone shift was immediate. Congresswoman, thank you for being here tonight, he began. I know this was not easy, and I want to be clear about something. I do not think you are a bad person. I really do not. He paused deliberately. I think you are sincere. I think you genuinely care about the issues you talk about. Climate change, income inequality. Those are real issues, he said softly. But caring is not enough. Feelings are not policy, and that is the problem. Then he began listing. You say you want money out of politics, yet you paid your boyfriend's company millions in campaign funds. You say you want to tax the rich, yet you attend $35,000 galas. You say you want to save the planet, yet your plan costs trillions you cannot explain how to fund. You say you fight for the working class, yet you celebrated when tens of thousands of high-paying jobs left your district. You say you are an economist, yet you misunderstand basic economic principles. You say you nearly died on January 6th, yet you were not in the building. You say you were arrested for your beliefs, yet you were never handcuffed. The list ended, but the silence did not. You are very good at making people feel like you are fighting for them, he said. The videos go viral. The tweets get shared. The followers pile up. You are a celebrity. You are a brand. You are a phenomenon. But here is what you are not good at. Doing anything. In 6 years, 0 bills passed. 0. The most famous member of Congress, the least effective. You have the platform, but you use it to build a brand, not to pass laws. He leaned back slightly. You have feelings. You have followers. You have fame. What you do not have is results. He looked directly into the camera. And that is the difference between us. Ben Shapiro shifted slightly in his chair and continued, his voice steady and unhurried, as if the hardest part of the night was already behind him. I am not a politician, he said, and I do not pretend to be one. I do not make promises I cannot keep. I do not spend other people's money while lecturing them about morality. And I do not build my reputation on images that fall apart under scrutiny. He turned back toward Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, his expression calm but unyielding. You compared my debate invitation to harassment, he reminded her. You framed me as someone with bad intentions simply for wanting to ask questions about policy. Tonight, America saw why you avoided those questions for so long. It was not because they were unfair, but because they were direct. You are not a socialist, he continued. You are not a revolutionary. You are not even, in practice, a legislator. You are a brand. And tonight, that brand just took a hit. He looked back toward the camera, letting the moment breathe. Facts do not care about your feelings, Congresswoman, and apparently, neither does reality. The audience sat in stunned silence as he finished. The debate was over, but the fallout had already begun. Before the broadcast even ended, clips of the exchange began circulating online. Short segments spread faster than the full video ever could. The opening line reappeared again and again, stripped of context and shared as a challenge. Facts do not care about your feelings. But tonight, I am about to hurt both. Within 72 hours, the combined views passed 80 million. Merchandise followed almost immediately. Memes multiplied at a pace that even seasoned internet observers found remarkable. Late-night commentary channels replayed the highlights on a loop. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's team released a statement accusing the debate of being a bad-faith ambush. They claimed CNN had structured the format to favor Ben Shapiro. The internet responded with receipts. Clips resurfaced of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez agreeing to the rules ahead of time. Interviews reappeared where she smiled confidently and said she was ready. She told supporters she would expose conservative talking points. For 4 days, she went silent on social media. For someone known to post multiple times before breakfast, the silence was striking. Commentators noticed immediately. Speculation filled the gap. Supporters urged patience, while critics framed the absence as retreat. The silence itself became part of the story. Ben Shapiro's platform experienced an immediate surge. The Daily Wire reported a dramatic spike in new memberships. Podcast downloads doubled within the week. Conservative media replayed the debate segments relentlessly. But the most significant effects were quieter and slower. Several progressive donors publicly questioned their continued support for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They asked, carefully at first, what the return on investment had been. Within 2 weeks, a primary challenger announced a campaign. The launch video featured clips from the debate. The message was unmistakable. Her Instagram engagement dropped sharply. Analysts tracked the numbers and shared screenshots. The phrase "0 bills passed" began appearing in attack ads nationwide. Progressive candidates were asked whether they planned to follow the same path. All performance, no policy became a recurring line. Saturday Night Live aired a sketch that surprised even longtime viewers. For years, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had been treated as a cultural icon. This time, the portrayal was sharper and less forgiving. The character obsessed over social media metrics while fumbling basic legislative questions. The audience laughed, but the tone felt different. 3 weeks after the debate, a reporter caught up with Ben Shapiro at a public event. They asked if he had any regrets about how the night unfolded. He paused, considering the question carefully. "No," he said finally, "and here is why. She called me a catcaller," he explained. "She compared me to someone harassing women simply for wanting a conversation. For 7 years, she avoided any serious challenge. The media treated her like a celebrity instead of a policymaker. All I did was treat her like a politician. I asked questions," he continued. "I cited facts. I held her accountable to her own words and actions. That is not cruelty. That is journalism." The reporter pushed back, noting that some viewers felt the exchange was harsh, cruel even. Shapiro almost laughed. "She is a sitting member of Congress," he said. "She votes on laws that affect hundreds of millions of people. If she cannot defend her positions against tough questions," he continued, "how is she supposed to negotiate legislation? How is she supposed to withstand pressure from other lawmakers? Truth is not cruel. Facts are not cruel. What is cruel is letting someone coast on aesthetics while real problems go unsolved." One final question followed. Did the debate change anything? Shapiro thought for a moment before answering. "I think it popped a bubble," he said. For years, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez existed in a protected world. In that world, the media never challenged her. Opponents never confronted her directly. Supporters attacked anyone who tried. She was untouchable, a celebrity above criticism. He smiled faintly. "She is not untouchable anymore. She is just a politician. And politicians have to answer questions." He leaned slightly toward the camera. "Facts do not care about your feelings," he said again. "They do not care about your followers. They do not care about your fame. Facts simply are. And once people see them clearly, they cannot unsee them." He stepped back as the interview ended. The spell was broken. The audience, online and offline, had been forced to reassess. Not everything that goes viral governs, and not every brand can survive a collision with reality.